Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and looked at the stars through the main screen, his coffee getting cold in his hands as he watched the empty space around them. The patrol mission had been quiet for 3 weeks now and the crew was getting restless. But Jake knew that space had a way of changing from boring to deadly in just a few seconds. His ship was one of the newer cruisers in the Earth Defense Fleet, built for long-range missions and first-contact situations, though most of their work involved checking on trade routes and making sure pirates stayed away from the shipping lanes. "Captain, we have something on long-range sensors," called out Communications Officer Lisa Grant from her station near the back of the bridge, her voice carrying that tone that meant something interesting was about to happen. Jake set down his coffee and walked over to look at her screen, where a small blip was moving slowly across the display. "What kind of something?" Jake asked as he leaned over her shoulder to get a better look at the readings, which showed an object that was much larger than any ship in their database. "Unknown vessel, sir. Coming out of hyperspace about 50,000 kilometers from our position," Lisa replied while her fingers moved quickly across her controls to get more information. "Size estimate puts it at least 10 times larger than our ship, and the energy readings are unlike anything I have ever seen before." Jake felt his heart speed up a little as he walked back to his command chair and pressed the button that would alert the rest of his senior staff to come to the bridge. First contact with unknown alien species was something every captain dreamed about and feared at the same time, because it could either be the beginning of a beautiful friendship or the start of a war that could destroy humanity. "Sir, the object is definitely a ship," reported Chief Science Officer Ryan Bell as he hurried onto the bridge and took his place at the science station. "The hull appears to be made of some kind of crystalline material that I cannot identify, and there are energy patterns running along its surface that look almost like a nervous system." Jake nodded and sat down in his chair, thinking about the protocols for first contact that he had studied during his training, but never expected to actually use. "All stations red alert, but do not charge weapons unless I give the order," he announced to his crew. "Lisa, open a channel on all frequencies and transmit our standard first contact message." The bridge filled with the soft red light of alert status as the crew took their positions and prepared for whatever might happen next. Jake watched the main screen as the alien ship grew larger, its crystalline hull reflecting the light from the nearby star and creating patterns that seemed to shift and dance across its surface. The ship was beautiful in a way that made Jake think of art more than military hardware, but he knew that appearances could be deceiving when dealing with unknown technology. "Captain, they are responding to our transmission," Lisa said with excitement in her voice. "The signal is being translated through our universal communication protocols, and it appears they speak perfect English." Jake raised an eyebrow at that piece of information, because the chances of an alien species speaking English without prior contact with humans was practically zero. "Put them on screen," he ordered as he straightened his uniform and prepared to make history. The main screen flickered and then showed the image of a tall, thin creature with pale skin that seemed to glow from within, 4 arms that moved gracefully as it spoke, and large dark eyes that seemed to hold intelligence and something that might have been sadness. The alien wore robes made of material that shifted colors like oil on water, and when it spoke, its voice had a musical quality that was both beautiful and somehow disturbing. "Greetings, humans of the vessel Defiance," the alien said with a slight bow of its head. "I am Ambassador Thylan of the Zolarian Collective, and I have traveled very far to find your kind and speak with you about matters of great importance to both our peoples." Jake stood up from his chair and stepped forward, trying to project confidence while his mind raced with questions about how this alien knew their ship's name and how it could speak English so perfectly. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Defiance," he replied formally. "We welcome peaceful contact with your people. Ambassador Thylan." The alien's expression changed slightly, and Jake thought he saw something like surprise cross its features before being replaced by what might have been pity or concern. "Captain Morrison, I must ask you a question that may seem strange," Thylan said slowly. "How much does your species know about its own history among the stars?" Jake felt confused by the question, because human space travel was well documented and only went back about 50 years to when they had first achieved faster than light travel. "We have detailed records of all human space exploration," Jake replied carefully. "Our first contact with alien intelligence was with the Centauri Trading Alliance 30 years ago." Thailand was quiet for a long moment, its forearms moving in what might have been a gesture of deep thought or perhaps prayer. "Captain Morrison, I must tell you something that will be difficult to believe," the alien finally said. "Your species has a reputation among the stars that goes back much further than your official records suggest, and that reputation is both feared and respected throughout this galaxy." The bridge fell silent as everyone stared at the screen, trying to understand what the alien was telling them. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that Thailand was suggesting that humans had been active in space long before their recorded history indicated. "I think there has been some mistake, Ambassador," Jake said slowly. "Humans only achieved interstellar travel 50 years ago, and we have had no contact with civilizations outside our local area until recently." Thailand's large eyes seemed to grow even sadder as it looked directly at Jake through the screen. "Then you truly do not know what your ancestors did to the Korthax Empire 300 years ago," the alien said softly. "You do not know about the scars they left across the galaxy that will never heal, or why so many civilizations fear the return of human military might." Jake felt his world shift as he realized that everything he thought he knew about human history might be wrong, and that his species might have a past that had been hidden or forgotten by time. "Ambassador Thailand," he said carefully, "I think we need to talk." Dr. Maya Singh arrived on the Defiance 3 days after the first contact with Ambassador Thailand, her transport ship docking with the cruiser, while both vessels remained in the neutral space where they had agreed to meet. Maya was Earth's top expert on alien cultures and ancient history, and Captain Morrison had requested her presence as soon as he realized that the conversation with the Zolarians was going to involve things that happened long before recorded human space travel. The main conference room had been set up with the best holographic display equipment the ship had, because Thailand had agreed to share historical records with them, but only if they could view the information properly. Maya sat at the long table with Captain Morrison and his senior staff, watching as the alien ambassador appeared on the screen from his own ship. "Dr. Singh," Thailand said with what seemed like respect in his musical voice, "I have reviewed your credentials and I believe you will understand the importance of what I am about to show you. However, I must warn you that this information may challenge everything your species believes about its own past." Maya leaned forward, her excitement barely contained as she prepared to see historical records from an alien civilization that apparently went back hundreds of years before human space travel. "We are ready, Ambassador," she said. "Please proceed." The holographic display in the center of the table flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional map of their galaxy as it had appeared centuries ago. Thousands of star systems pulsed with different colors, and Maya could see that the galaxy had been much more densely populated in the past than it was now. "This is how our galaxy looked 300 years ago," Thailand explained as the display slowly rotated to show different angles. "Each color represents a different civilization, and as you can see, there were many more active spacefaring cultures than exist today." Maya studied the display carefully, noting that one particular color dominated a huge section of the galaxy, covering what looked like thousands of star systems in deep red. "That red area," she said, pointing to the massive region. "What civilization controlled all of that space?" "The Korthax Empire," Thailand replied, and his voice took on a darker tone as he spoke the name. "They were the most powerful military force this galaxy had ever seen, conquering and enslaving entire species across 40% of known space. For over 2,000 years, they spread their control through fear and violence, destroying any civilization that refused to submit to their rule." The display changed to show closer views of Korthax territory, revealing massive fleets of dark angular ships that looked like they had been designed for war and nothing else. Maya watched in fascination as the hologram showed these fleets moving from system to system, overwhelming smaller civilizations with their superior numbers and technology. "The Korthax were not just conquerors," Thailand continued. "They were destroyers of cultures, enslavers of populations, and they took pleasure in the suffering they caused. Every species in the galaxy lived in fear of their expansion, knowing that resistance meant death and submission meant a life of slavery under their rule." Captain Morrison studied the tactical displays with professional interest, noting the way the Korthax fleets moved and operated. "They must have had incredible military technology to control so much space," he observed. "Indeed they did," Thailand agreed. "Their ships were larger and more powerful than anything we have today. Their weapons could destroy entire planets, and their soldiers were trained from birth to be perfect warriors. Many civilizations tried to resist them over the centuries, but all failed until something unprecedented happened. The display changed again, showing a small area of space on the edge of Korthax territory, where several tiny dots appeared, much smaller than any of the other ships shown in the historical record. Maya leaned closer to get a better look at these newcomers, noting that their design was completely different from anything else in the display. "These ships," she said slowly, recognizing something familiar about their shape. "They look almost human." "Because they were human," Thailand replied, and the room fell silent as everyone stared at the display. 3 vessels containing 67 humans appeared in Korthax space 312 years ago, far from your home system, and with technology that should not have allowed them to travel such distances. Dr. Maya Singh felt her heart racing as she realized what this meant for human history. "But that's impossible," she said. "Humans barely had primitive spacecraft 300 years ago, and we certainly didn't have faster-than-light travel or the ability to reach other galaxies. According to our records, these humans did not arrive through conventional space travel," Thailand explained. "They appeared suddenly in Korthax territory after what seems to have been an experimental faster-than-light drive malfunction that transported them across impossible distances through space and time." The holographic display zoomed in on the 3 human ships, showing them in detail for the first time. Maya could see that they were indeed human designs, but from an era of space exploration that she knew had never achieved interstellar capability. The ships looked like they might have been built in the late 21st or early 22nd century, primitive by current standards, but somehow advanced enough to have survived the journey to another galaxy. "What happened to them?" asked Commander Alex Carter, the ship's tactical officer, as he studied the display with professional curiosity. "The Korthax captured them immediately," Thailand replied. 67 humans aboard 3 ships, completely cut off from their home and surrounded by the most powerful military force in galactic history. By all reasonable expectations, they should have been executed within days of their capture. The display showed the human ships being surrounded by massive Korthax vessels and being brought to what appeared to be a military facility orbiting a dark planet. Maya watched as the tiny human ships disappeared into the much larger alien structure, swallowed up by their captors. "But they were not executed," Thailand continued, and something in his voice suggested that what came next was both amazing and terrible. "The Korthax decided to study these strange new aliens, to learn about their technology and their culture before deciding what to do with them. This decision would prove to be the greatest mistake in galactic history." Navigation Officer Kate Johnson looked up from her notes with a puzzled expression. "How could 67 humans possibly threaten an empire that controlled half the galaxy?" she asked. Thailand was quiet for a moment before responding, and when he did speak, his voice carried what sounded like respect mixed with fear. "Because the Korthax had never encountered anything like human adaptability and determination before," he said slowly. "They thought they were studying primitive aliens, but they were actually giving humans time to study them." The display changed to show the interior of Korthax facilities, where Maya could see small groups of humans being moved from location to location. At first they appeared to be prisoners, but as the timeline progressed, she began to notice that the humans seemed to be paying careful attention to everything around them. "The humans spent 2 years in Korthax captivity," Thailand explained, "and during that time they learned the Korthax language, studied their technology, observed their military procedures, and most importantly, they identified their weaknesses. When they finally escaped, they did not just flee to safety. The display showed the human prisoners suddenly turning on their guards in a coordinated attack that seemed to happen across multiple facilities at the same time. Maya watched in amazement as the tiny group of humans overwhelmed their captors and seized control of Korthax, equipment and vehicles. They began a campaign of liberation and revenge that would last 30 years and completely destroy the Korthax Empire, Thailand said, and his voice carried a note of awe that sent chills down Maya's spine. 67 humans brought down the greatest military power this galaxy had ever known, and in doing so, they changed the course of history forever. The holographic display shifted to show a detailed timeline of the war that followed the human escape from Korthax captivity, and Dr. Maya Singh found herself leaning forward to study every detail of what appeared to be the most incredible military campaign in galactic history. The records showed that the 67 humans had not simply escaped and hidden, but had instead begun a systematic campaign to destroy their former captors. The leader of the human group was a woman named Captain Elena Brooks. Ambassador Thylin explained as the display focused on a section of space where small human-controlled ships were moving between star systems. She had been the captain of one of the 3 original ships, and during their time in captivity, she had become the unofficial leader of all the human prisoners. Maya studied the tactical displays with fascination, watching as the humans seemed to appear and disappear throughout Korthak's territory like ghosts. How were they able to move around so freely? She asked. The Korthaks controlled thousands of star systems. Captain Brooks and her people had learned to think like the Korthaks during their imprisonment, Thylin replied. They understood Korthak's military doctrine, their communication systems, their patrol patterns, and most importantly, they knew how to exploit the Korthak's tendency to underestimate other species. The display showed the humans making contact with enslaved populations on dozens of worlds, and Maya could see that they were not just fighting the Korthaks themselves, but were teaching others how to fight. Small rebellions began appearing throughout Korthak's space, each one using tactics that were completely different from anything the Empire had faced before. Commander Alex Carter watched the tactical movements with professional admiration. They were using guerrilla warfare, he observed. Hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, psychological operations. The Korthaks were used to fighting conventional battles against organized fleets, not this kind of irregular warfare. Exactly, Thylin confirmed. The humans introduced concepts that were completely foreign to galactic warfare. They taught enslaved species how to make improvised weapons, how to conduct sabotage operations, how to use propaganda to turn populations against their oppressors, and most importantly, how to fight dirty. The timeline advanced, showing the rebellion spreading across hundreds of star systems as more and more species joined the human-led coalition. Maya watched in amazement as the red areas representing Korthak's control began to shrink, while new colors appeared, representing the liberated worlds and their new human-influenced governments. Dr. Paul Adams was the chief medical officer of the human group. Thylin continued as the display focused on several worlds where biological warfare appeared to be taking place. During their captivity, he had studied Korthak's physiology and genetics, and he used this knowledge to develop weapons specifically designed to target their species. Maya felt a chill as she realized what this meant. Biological weapons, she said quietly. They created diseases that only affected the Korthaks. Among other things, Thylin replied with what seemed like reluctance. Adams also developed psychological warfare techniques that could drive Korthak soldiers insane. Chemical weapons that could penetrate their protective equipment, and worst of all, he taught these techniques to other species so they could adapt them for use against their own oppressors. The display showed engineer Sam Walsh, who had memorized the construction details of every Korthak's facility he had been held in, and was now teaching other species how to build weapons and ships using stolen Korthak's technology. Meanwhile, Marine Sergeant Tony Martinez was training alien soldiers in human combat techniques that emphasized speed, adaptability, and ruthless efficiency over the formal military traditions that most galactic civilizations had followed for centuries. The Korthak's empire had ruled through fear and superior technology, Thylin explained as the display showed massive Korthak's fleets being defeated by much smaller human-led forces. But the humans taught their allies that technology could be stolen, fear could be overcome, and that any enemy could be defeated if you were willing to sacrifice honor for victory. Navigation Officer Kate Johnson studied the movements of the human fleet with growing unease. They were not just fighting to free the enslaved worlds, she observed. They were systematically hunting down every Korthak's military installation, every government facility, every population center. The war changed them, Thylin said sadly. What began as a liberation campaign became something much darker. Captain Brooks died in the 15th year of the war, killed during a raid on a Korthak's weapons facility, and command passed to Dr. Adams. The display showed the change in tactics that followed, as the human-led coalition became more aggressive and more willing to use extreme measures. Entire Korthak's worlds were rendered uninhabitable, not through conquest, but through the deliberate use of weapons that made them impossible to live on. Adams had seen too much death and suffering, Thylin continued. He had watched the Korthax destroy entire civilizations, and he was determined to ensure that they could never do so again. Under his leadership, the Coalition did not just defeat Korthax military forces, they eliminated them completely. Maya watched in horror as the display showed the systematic destruction of Korthax civilian populations, not through direct killing, but through the use of weapons that sterilized entire planets and made reproduction impossible. They committed genocide, she whispered. They called it justice, Thylon replied. And many of the species they had liberated agreed with them, because they had suffered under Korthax rule for so long that they wanted revenge more than they wanted peace. The timeline advanced to show the final years of the war, as the human-led coalition grew to include thousands of ships from dozens of different species, all armed with weapons that combined Korthax technology with human innovation and ruthlessness. The remaining Korthax forces were driven back to their core systems, surrounded and outnumbered by enemies who had learned to fight with human tactics and human determination. The final battle took place at the Korthax homeworld, Thylon said as the display showed a massive fleet engagement around a dark planet covered in military installations. Dr. Adams led the assault personally, using weapons that the humans had developed specifically for this moment. Maya watched as the display showed the destruction of not just the Korthax military, but of their entire homeworld, reduced to lifeless rock by weapons that seemed to tear apart the very atoms of matter. What kind of weapons could do that? She asked in shock. Weapons that should never have been created, Thylon replied grimly. The humans had learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to create chain reactions that could destroy entire planets, to build machines that could think and fight on their own. They had become the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. Security Chief Dan Cooper had been quietly studying the tactical displays, and now he looked up with a troubled expression. What happened after they won? He asked. What did they do with all that power? Thylon was quiet for a long moment before answering, and when he did speak, his voice carried a sadness that seemed to fill the entire room. They discovered that it is much easier to destroy an empire than it is to replace it with something better, he said slowly. And they learned that humans who have been taught to win at any cost do not easily learn when to stop fighting. The holographic display changed to show the aftermath of the Korthax Empire's destruction, and Dr. Maya Singh felt her stomach turn as she realized that the story was far from over. The galaxy that appeared on the screen was a chaotic mess of small territories and independent worlds, with no central authority to maintain order or peace between the hundreds of different species that had been freed from Korthax rule. The coalition that the humans had built to fight the Korthax was never meant to govern. Ambassador Thylon explained as the display showed conflicts breaking out between former allies across dozens of star systems. It was a military organization designed for war, and when the war ended, the leaders did not know how to transform it into something that could bring peace. Maya watched as the timeline advanced to show Dr. Paul Adams and the other surviving human leaders trying to maintain control over their vast coalition. But it was clear that the alliance was falling apart without a common enemy to fight. Species that had worked together against the Korthax now turned on each other over territorial disputes, resource rights, and old grudges that had been set aside during the war. Adams tried to hold the coalition together through force, Thylon continued, and the display showed human-led fleets moving to suppress rebellions and enforce the new order. He believed that only strong central control could prevent the galaxy from falling back into the chaos that had allowed the Korthax to rise to power in the first place. Captain Morrison studied the tactical displays with growing unease, noting that the human tactics had become increasingly brutal and uncompromising. They were becoming the very thing they had fought against, he observed quietly. Worse, Thylon replied grimly. The Korthax had been conquerors who wanted slaves and tribute, but they had at least been interested in maintaining stable populations to exploit. The humans had learned to wage total war, and they applied those lessons to governing as well. The display showed worlds that had resisted human authority being subjected to weapons that made the Korthax arsenal look primitive by comparison. Maya watched in horror as entire star systems were rendered uninhabitable, not through invasion but through the deliberate use of technology that poisoned their atmospheres, corrupted their ecosystems, or simply made their suns burn out. Dr. Adams had spent 30 years studying how to destroy his enemies completely, Thailand explained as the display showed the systematic elimination of species that opposed human rule. He had learned to create weapons that could target specific genetic markers, nanomachines that could dismantle matter at the molecular level, and psychological warfare techniques that could drive entire populations to madness or suicide. Engineer Gary Miller leaned back in his chair with a sick expression on his face. "How many species did they eliminate?" he asked quietly. 47 intelligent species were completely destroyed during the 5 years that followed the end of the Korthax War, Thailand replied, and the conference room fell silent as everyone tried to comprehend the scale of the genocide. Not conquered or enslaved, but completely eliminated from existence, along with their cultures, their histories, and their unique contributions to galactic civilization. The display showed the human-controlled territory expanding as more and more worlds submitted to their authority, rather than face complete destruction. But Maya could see that the coalition was becoming increasingly unstable as even the humans' allies began to fear what their protectors had become. The breaking point came when Adams decided that the only way to ensure permanent peace was to eliminate the possibility of future conflicts, Thailand said as the display showed human scientists working on projects that seemed to involve fundamental forces of physics. He began developing weapons that would not just destroy enemies, but would prevent them from ever existing in the first place. Medic Caroline Fisher looked up from her notes with confusion. "What does that mean?" she asked. "How do you prevent something from existing?" "By manipulating the fundamental structure of space and time itself," Thailand replied, and his voice carried a tone of horror that made everyone in the room feel cold. The humans had learned to create weapons that could unravel the fabric of reality, that could reach backwards through time to eliminate their enemies before they were ever born, that could create zones where the laws of physics operated differently. The timeline advanced to show the final war, as the human coalition finally turned on itself when some of the surviving human leaders realized what Adams was planning and tried to stop him. Maya watched as human fleets fought against each other using weapons that seemed to tear holes in space itself, creating zones of distorted reality where ships would enter and never emerge. Engineer Sam Walsh led the rebellion against Adams, Thailand explained as the display showed battles that defied everything Maya thought she knew about physics. He had helped create many of the weapons that Adams was using, and he understood better than anyone how dangerous they had become. The war between the human factions lasted 5 years, and involved weapons that operated on principles that seemed impossible. Maya watched ships disappear from existence, stars being extinguished by devices no larger than shuttlecraft, and entire solar systems being twisted into configurations that hurt to look at. Marine Sergeant Tony Martinez died when Adams tested a weapon that erased him from history, Thailand said quietly. One moment he existed, the next moment he had never been born, and only the quantum echoes in our historical records prove that he was ever real. The display showed the final battle, where the last surviving humans destroyed each other using weapons that were so powerful, they damaged the structure of space-time itself. Maya watched as reality seemed to break apart around the combatants, creating wounds in the universe that glowed with impossible colors. When it was over, there were no survivors, Thailand said as the display showed the aftermath of the conflict. All of the humans were dead, along with most of their allies and anyone else who had been unlucky enough to be nearby when they used their most powerful weapons. The display zoomed in on several star systems that appeared completely wrong, where space itself seemed to be bent and twisted into shapes that should not have been possible. Maya could see that these areas were completely empty of life, devoid even of normal matter, as if they had been torn out of reality itself. "These are the scars that your title refers to," Thailand explained solemnly. "Regions of space where the humans' final weapons tore holes in the fabric of the universe that will never heal. No ship can safely travel through these zones, no life can exist there, and even our most advanced technology cannot repair the damage that was done." Pilot Jerry Baker stared at the display with fascination and horror. "How many of these scars are there?" he asked. 17 major zones and hundreds of smaller ones, Thailand replied. "Each one is a permanent reminder of what happens when a species with human adaptability and determination decides that victory is more important than survival, and that any price is acceptable to pay for the complete destruction of their enemies." Intelligence Officer Laura King had been quietly analyzing the data throughout the presentation. and now she looked up with a troubled expression. "Ambassador Thylan," she said carefully, "why are you telling us this story? What do you want from humanity now?" Thylan was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of sadness and fear that made everyone in the room understand that this was not just a history lesson. "Because you are doing it again," he said simply. The words hung in the air of the conference room like a death sentence, and Captain Jake Morrison felt his blood turn cold as he realized what Ambassador Thylan was suggesting. The alien's large dark eyes seemed to look directly into his soul as the holographic display shifted to show current galactic political boundaries, with humanity's expanding sphere of influence highlighted in the same blue that had represented Earth's colonies. "What do you mean we are doing it again?" Dr. Maya Singh asked, though her voice suggested that she already understood the terrible implications of what Thylan was telling them. "Your expansion into the galaxy has followed the same pattern as your ancestors," Thylan replied as the display showed the rapid growth of human influence over the past 50 years. "You encounter problems, you adapt to overcome them, you make allies. You learn from your enemies, and you grow stronger with each challenge." The display showed Earth's first contact with alien civilizations, the formation of trade agreements, the establishment of colonies, and the gradual building of military alliances that had made humanity one of the most influential species in their region of space. Maya could see that the pattern was indeed similar to what the ancient humans had done, though on a much smaller scale and without the genocidal violence. "But that sounds like normal expansion and diplomacy," Commander Alex Carter protested. "We have not conquered anyone or destroyed any civilizations." "Not yet," Thylan agreed, and his voice carried a note of certainty that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "But the signs are all there, the same signs that preceded the Korthax War and the devastation that followed." The display zoomed in on specific examples of human behavior that Thylan found concerning. Maya watched as it showed human scientists reverse engineering alien technology, human diplomats forming complex alliance networks, and human military forces developing new weapons and tactics based on what they had learned from other species. 23 civilizations have pledged formal alliance with Earth, Thylan noted as the display highlighted those worlds in blue. 17 others have implemented defensive pacts specifically designed to counter human expansion, because they recognize the pattern even if you do not. Security Chief Dan Cooper studied the defensive alliances with professional interest, noting that they formed a rough containment barrier around human space. "They are afraid of us," he observed. "Terrified," Thylan confirmed, "because they have access to the same historical records that I have shown you, and they know what happens when humans decide that they need to solve a problem permanently." The display showed recent incidents where human forces had been involved in conflicts with pirates, slavers, and aggressive alien governments, and Maya could see that in each case, the human response had been disproportionately effective and sometimes brutal compared to what other species would have done. "The Vargan slavers were completely eliminated after they attacked your colony on New Terra," Thylan pointed out as the display showed the aftermath of that conflict. "Not just defeated or driven away, but hunted down to the last ship and destroyed utterly, along with their bases, their support networks, and anyone who had collaborated with them." Captain Morrison remembered that incident well, because he had participated in the final assault on the Vargan stronghold. "They were slavers and murderers," he said defensively. "The galaxy is better off without them." "That is exactly what Dr. Adams said about the Korthax," Thylan replied quietly. "And about the 47 species that he eliminated afterwards, each time with the same justification that the galaxy would be better off without them." The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by engineer Gary Miller, who had been studying the technical specifications shown in the display. "You said that the ancient humans developed weapons that could manipulate space and time," he said slowly. "Our current technology is nowhere near that level." "Your current public technology," Thylan corrected. "But our intelligence indicates that human research into quantum mechanics, nanotechnology, and exotic matter has advanced much further than your government admits, and that several of your military research facilities are working on projects that bear striking similarities to the weapons that destroyed the Korthax homeworld." Maya felt a chill as she realized that Thylan was suggesting that humanity was already developing the tools that could lead to another galactic catastrophe. "Even if that were true," she said carefully, Humans today are not the same as those ancient refugees. We have learned from history. We have ethical guidelines. We have international laws that prevent the development of weapons of mass destruction. The humans who destroyed the Korthax Empire also had ethical guidelines, Thailand pointed out. Captain Elena Brooks was by all accounts a moral and principled leader who only wanted to free the enslaved worlds and return home to Earth. Dr. Adams was a medical officer whose oath required him to preserve life, not destroy it. The display showed images of the ancient human leaders, and Maya was struck by how normal they looked, how similar they were to the humans she knew today. These were not monsters or madmen, but ordinary people who had been pushed beyond their limits by circumstances they could not control. War changes people, Thailand continued, especially wars where the enemy shows no mercy and threatens everything you care about. The humans who fought the Korthax learned that mercy was a luxury they could not afford, that honor was less important than victory, and that any weapon was acceptable to use if it meant protecting their allies and defeating their enemies. Navigation Officer Kate Johnson looked up from her analysis of the historical data with a troubled expression. "Are you saying that we are destined to repeat this cycle?" she asked. "That humanity will inevitably become a threat to galactic civilization?" "I am saying that the potential exists," Thailand replied carefully. "Every advancement in human technology makes you more dangerous. Every tactical innovation you develop is eventually turned against you by your enemies, forcing you to become more ruthless and more willing to use extreme measures to protect yourselves." The display showed current tensions between humanity and several aggressive alien species, including the hegemony of Blades, which had been making territorial demands, and the Crimson Fleet, which had been raiding human shipping lanes. Maya could see that these conflicts were escalating, and that human responses were becoming more aggressive with each incident. "The cycle always begins the same way," Thailand explained. "A human encounter with an enemy that cannot be reasoned with, that threatens innocent lives, that must be stopped at any cost. Each victory teaches you new ways to fight. Each defeat shows you new weaknesses to exploit, and each war makes you more willing to do whatever is necessary to win the next one." Captain Morrison stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars and thinking about the weight of responsibility that seemed to rest on his shoulders, and those of every other human in space. "What do you want us to do?" he asked finally. "Withdraw from galactic civilization? Stop defending ourselves? Allow aggressors to attack us without response? I want you to learn from history," Thailand replied. "The 67 humans who destroyed the Korthax Empire were heroes who saved countless lives and freed an entire galaxy from tyranny. But they became something else because they could not recognize when to stop fighting, when mercy was more important than victory, when the cost of winning had become too high to pay." The alien stood up from his chair on the distant ship, his forearms moving in what might have been a gesture of respect or farewell. "The scars that your ancestors left will never heal," he said solemnly. "Dead zones in space where reality itself is broken, civilizations that never recovered from the wars they fought, entire species that went extinct not from conquest but from the weapons that humanity taught them to build." He paused, looking directly at Captain Morrison through the screen. "But perhaps this time humans can choose a different path. Perhaps this time you can learn when enough is enough. The galaxy is watching, Captain Morrison, and the question is not whether humanity will change the galaxy because you already are. The question is whether you will leave it better than you found it, or whether you will leave new scars that will never heal." As the transmission ended and the Zalarian ship prepared to depart, it sent one final piece of data to the Defiance, coordinates to the nearest scar zone, where the weapons of humanity's past had torn irreparable holes in the fabric of space itself. "When you are ready to see what unlimited human potential truly costs," Thailand's final message read, "you will find us there, standing guard over the wounds that will never close."